Coming to you live from the Hollywood Hills, we are here with Real Social Dynamics Live on the Ask Nick Kho Show.
Material witness, that's
Question of the day: how does body language affect your interpersonal communications in both the business and social world? It has a huge impact on how people view you in business, because when I was at a meeting with a president of a huge company, they're one of the largest tech companies in the world. He was at a board of directors meeting with another member who was also the president of a global company. The only difference is that when he was slouching in his chair, the other CEO yelled at him and said, "Am I boring you? What's going on here?" And immediately he stood up in his chair, but added more attention, made it look like he was paying attention. Little cues like that, although it might not be your intention or how you feel. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe he just felt like it was more relaxing to lean back. But little cues like that, in terms of a business setting, can make a huge deal. On a personal way, in your dating and your communication, it also makes a big deal. I know that in terms of pickup, if you're in a large group and you're in a bar or club, if you don't have that girl that you're trying to pick up interacting with you, facing you in that one-on-one kind of vibe, and just like more of a group vibe, you're not going to really get to communicate with her in a more effective way. For example, let's say that you're walking up to a girl that's sitting down and she's down way below you. Here's a situation where you're hovering over her. It might be difficult for her to hear what you're saying. She might not be able to hear what you're saying because it's a loud club. Maybe the music is too loud. On the other hand, maybe it's because you're just towering over her. She feels a little bit less comfortable, as opposed to, let's say that you're sitting down on the same level. In the same sense, in the business world, if you have that same towering effect, it feels like you're uncomfortable. If you're less comfortable than that other person, they're going to feel that vibe off you, and it's just not going to come across well. The other thing that's really important in terms of body language is how you look. Sometimes I might not be happy. Maybe in my personal life, I'm just feeling a lot of pressure. Maybe my business is draining me. So maybe instead of smiling, I might just be like kind of not smiling. And maybe someone will interpret that in a wrong way. For example, I was having a business meeting with an executive of my company, and my face was just like a neutral face, just like how it is right now. However, he thought it was a scowl or a sense of anger, as opposed to what I was just feeling. I was just feeling how my life was feeling that day. I wasn't feeling like anything against the other person. There was no animosity, there was no intent behind how I was presenting myself. However, just from those facial expressions, it communicates a lot. Now, when you're in a nightclub or you're trying to interact with someone you're trying to impress in the business world, a smile could change every little bit of the interaction altogether. It might make it so the other person feels like you're having fun, you're comfortable, you're at ease. A lot of your body, in terms of like how stiff you are, how rigid you are, or how loose you are, having fun, or how animated you are, it kind of portrays whether or not you're someone who's bored by your interaction or whether you're engaged in interaction. In addition to that, a lot of your communication could also convey how comfortable you are with the other people. For example, if you go up to somebody and you give them a hug, even if they're a billionaire of a company, you shake their hand, you pull them in, you give them a hug, it kind of shows that you have trust, you have comfort around that person, as opposed to a lot of people who will meet people of such high status who will just like shake their hand or maybe just say hi, you're too afraid of touching them. It allows you to convey that you're more of like a friend as opposed to somebody who's not. Now, not everyone has that same natural vibe of trying to have like that brotherhood around everyone they interact with. It comes across in how you interact. If you're not naturally a person who gets close to other people, it's going to be natural for you to get used to that. It wasn't always natural that I was that kind of person either, though. I used to be more of a standoffish kind of person, didn't want to invade in other people's space. A lot of people are afraid of getting too close because that invasion of space can make people uncomfortable, especially if you're in a weird conversation or you're in conversation with someone who doesn't really know who you are very well. It's kind of awkward. You've got to understand and empathize with the other person so they could feel what you feel. You could even acknowledge that, you know, what you're doing is kind of awkward. Like, let's say that you're sitting with, or let's say that the person you're interacting with is sitting and there's nowhere for you to sit. You know, I know it's kind of awkward. I have to stand up and hover over you, but I'd like to talk to you about this and this and this. And it's like just acknowledging some of the uncomfortable situations that are going on, or even if like you have a situation where the bar or club is really loud, you taking a step back even more makes the person lean into you. It kind of like forces them to kind of get more engaged in conversation. But of course, you want to try to create an optimal, ideal environment where you can both sit down and engage with each other, or you're both standing, or you're walking together. The funny thing about walking together, or just moving from place to place to place, just that process makes you feel like you know people for longer. Just the process of going out, meeting a girl at a bar and then a restaurant and then somewhere else and what have you, just going from venue to venue to venue makes you feel like you know each other longer, as opposed to just sitting in the same coffee shop venue for the same amount of time. It doesn't feel like you have that same closeness. It's kind of weird. I know that if you give someone a tour of a city, even though that tour may have been 2 hours, because you see so many different places, it feels like you know each other longer. It's kind of like that spatial environment of how space and distance and body language and interacting with the physical world affects our communication in general. One of the most interesting things that people always think are really unique is they watch Owen in the field. He might give a girl like a funny facial expression, and the girl runs up to him and starts talking to him. They're like, what's going on here? What did he do? It's just the little things like that, like a smirk or a smile or little things like that, can really captivate people's interest. Now in the business world, showing that you're open, showing you're willing to shake their hand, showing that you're willing to give a hug, or like your body weight just conveys the same kind of thing without you actually doing it. A lot of that also creates that sense of trust, respect, and it makes you feel like you're more honest, especially if you're smiling as opposed to frowning, especially if you're like communicating in a very direct manner as opposed to being more off topic. You know, I think a lot of people just are so surprised when radical honesty in and of itself, conveyed through your words, your body language, or everything, when as a congruent message, it's so important because when you're interacting with anyone, there's two selves being conveyed. They're how you view yourself inside, and they're what other people view you as. I used to do an exercise on boot camp where you took a box of crayons and people would draw a picture first of who they view themselves as, and then who they thought people view them as when they were picking up girls, or when they're in business, or any other kind of social environment where you have other people kind of judging you. Because unintentionally, everyone, even if there's a judgment-free zone, will judge that other person in terms of like what they think they believe, who they are, based on their previous experience, life experience. And most of the time, those two images that I have my students draw are very, very different images, because who you view yourself and who other people view you are usually not the same thing. What you're trying to do is bridge that congruency gap so as close as possible. Because when you're not those two different people, when you believe that other person views you in the same way you view yourself, that is what builds a closeness. It's what friendship's all about. It's what intimacy is when you're in a relationship. It's kind of like knowing that that other person that you trust, you respect, you care about, they kind of view you and they really care about the real you, as opposed to the you think you may have had them perceive you as. So that's why it's so important that body language maintain a really important tool in your arsenal in terms of communication. Because if you don't have that congruence, you're not going to have that deep impact in the same way that you would have with a deep personal friend or a deep relationship, especially in terms of business. The other part, though, is just clarity of expectations. See, a lot of people expect people to act in a certain way when you're around them. It might be a cultural sense. Maybe you're in a particular way, you have to dress a certain way, and your body language is a particular way. I know that in Russia and in the Ukraine, we used to joke about how a lot of people would kind of like not have a happy face. They wouldn't be smiling. They thought it was a weird sign to see all these Americans smiling everywhere. They just had like a neutral face when they're waiting in line for a bar or club or what have you. And they would always joke that we would have an American smile on our face. It's kind of a cultural reference. So you got to understand also where you're traveling. Now, most of the time though, it's a huge difference. For example, I know tall guys, really, really tall guys are really buff and have an imposing figure. When they walk up to girls, if they're not smiling, a lot of them can be scared of them. I know a lot of that happens in business as well, especially when you have guys who are really small and tiny and trying to do business with them. It's part of networking in general though. It's the business world and your personal life. The communication, the kind of relationships you have to build, all of it is entangled. All of it feels very, very similar. If you're comfortable with touching the other person and they're comfortable with touching you, handshakes, your closeness, the proximity of you are with that other person is like normal. You're used to being with the other person in a very close proximity, sitting next to them, or you don't act like you're scared of getting close to them, they'll feel that. Now, if you have the opposite, like let's say they're scared of getting too close to that other person, you also will feel that. I know I had students that were on boot camp and they're so afraid of getting too close to girls during the daytime when they're approaching them in a shopping mall. They felt like if they got too close to that person, they would run away because they're busy doing their life. And in like a bar, a club, or a lounge where you just sit and people are naturally just there just for the purpose of socializing, when you're trying to meet people during the daytime, that's one of the issues. The same thing goes, let's say you're at a business convention and you have a lot of people there to network with each other. It's like a bar or club where people are there to network, and they would expect that people would walk up to other people, introduce themselves, and start talking because there's a potential for a business. On the other hand, you have a very different environment where you just say you're a visitor or touring someone's business and you're concerned about walking up to somebody in the business and starting a conversation. But if you're natural about the whole process, if a lot of this feels normal to you, your body language will convey these things, and your attitude and your energy will also be conveyed in the same kind of manner. Now, in terms of like the mindset of business, in terms of like what we call physical game, a lot of it has to do with you kind of practicing. A lot of this is like field experience, reference experiences. A lot of people are always talking in terms of the dating world is, when do I go for that first kiss? In the business world, it's like, when should I like reach out and like tap the guy in the back or give him a handshake or what have you? Maybe it's only the beginning or what have you. Or where should I position myself in an environment? Should I get up? If I'm in a group environment and there's a group of 10 people in business, should I walk around the group? Is that polite? The answer is yeah, you should do what you feel was most comfortable. Etiquette, according to a guy who was a member of British royalty, he told me, when I look at etiquette, it is really just whatever makes you feel comfortable and makes everyone else around you feel comfortable, no matter what it is, even if it's not following Emily Post's guide to proper etiquette, if it's not following the typical rules of fancifulness. If you walk up to a group and you have a person in that group that you really want to engage with, you're going to have more success if you get that person to face away from the group and engage with you directly, as opposed to you trying to talk over other people. So you got to realize the dynamics of the group if you have all these people in the group. If your conversations cross paths, you're not going to have the same level of rapport. In the same manner with your one-on-one with the girl, if you have your arm around her, it's a lot easier for you to be close with that girl, your arm around that girl, and you're talking to that girl, as opposed to trying to talk to her when she's on the opposite side of a table and you're at a dinner or a restaurant or something like that. But if you are one-on-one, you can still develop a lot of that conversation, communication, especially if you're not in a loud bar or club. There's very few dynamics in body language that I believe are absolutely critical, but the ones that I think are most important are your facial expressions. If you don't convey a sense of seriousness and you're in a serious situation, you're going to convey the wrong vibe. Let's say you're smirking, you're smiling, and it's not a time for doing that. In the opposite sense, if you don't look like you're having fun and you're in a bar or club, and a lot of business is done in the bar or club, especially in my business, but in most businesses, when you're trying to network and you're trying to make sales, a lot of it is not just in the office, it's in those personal environments, because business is based upon that relationship of liking each other. And the same thing goes in dating and friendships. So as a result, most of your relationship building is done in some kind of personal way. Even if you're trying to close a business deal, a lot of it will be done over dinners or drinks. In fact, if you look at the RSD board of directors, most of our meetings happen over meals because it creates fun and adds a vibe and energy to the environment, as opposed to just being in an office where you're just sitting next to each other and you're trying to make business happen and making deals happen. Of course, sometimes you want to be in a private environment, so having an office where you could actually make deals happen is important. We have that. We have it here. We also have it in Las Vegas. And by having those close quarters, you kind of have the ability of trust and confidentiality. Yet that discreetness is also extremely important in your dating and your personal life as well. Now, body language in and of itself, there's been books that are 700 pages that talk about all sorts of things. Like maybe you need to mirror the other person's body language, which is the concept that if their hands are like on the table like this, then you might do that. If their arm is around the couch, you might do that. If you're talking at a certain pace, you might want to talk at the same pace as them. There's mirroring, there's anchoring, where you touch the other person and you kind of like try to associate with a certain feeling. A lot of this works with people naturally because they kind of have rules and guidelines of what they're supposed to do. And I think a lot of people will talk about how often this stuff works. I naturally will do a lot of these things, but I'm not trying to purposefully mirror anchor people continually. It's just something that naturally happens. However, I'm cognizant that these things exist because a lot of people in the business world will purposefully try to do these things to you because they know from all the books they've read about body language that this is what they're looking for. The key to body language language, though, when I go back to it all, is the same key that I'm talking about in terms of etiquette. You do whatever makes you most comfortable, and if you feel like it makes everyone else comfortable. That's what calibration is. In terms of your words, in terms of your body language, in terms of how you're leading the other people, that's what it is. On the other hand, in terms of leading the conversation, body language, in terms of animation, looking at people in the eye and looking at who you're talking to, guiding them, all that stuff is important as a leader because it shows that you're the person taking charge if you're leading the group in the direction you want to be. At the same time, another job as leaders is knowing to listen, when to hold back and listen, put your hands down, relax, shows you're paying attention, listen to them. You know, you're not like sleeping or dozing off or what have you. All these little cues are very important. You'll be surprised, even in a large group seminar, speakers will always say that they don't like how certain people in the back of the room are talking to each other. They'll notice little things like that. And those little things might be them sharing ideas or saying, hey, what did this person say? It was really good, but they don't know. But they'll notice little things like that. Comedians will do it all the time. Because your physical cues of what you're doing are one of the natural things that everyone looks at first and foremost. It's what makes the first impression. Now, we talk all the time about how looks don't matter because it doesn't matter in the sense that a lot of people will think that they have to look a certain way or they can't get what they want, but that's not true. The thing is, looks do matter in the sense that your body language, how you carry yourself, how you dress, if it's a presentable way, definitely do matter in the sense of making sure that you could prove to the people that you're interacting with that you understand a lot of the common norms of society. And you also are the person who's on top of his game in terms of understanding that, because all sorts of things in life, in terms of calibration, convey whether you're somebody that they want to work with, whether you're somebody that they want to do business with, or whether you're somebody they want to have a personal relationship or any kind of relationship with. So when you look at body language from these kind of standpoints, look at it from the standpoint more than anything else is the other person I'm talking to or the other people I'm talking to. Do they feel calibrated? Are they feeling the vibe that I want them to feel? If not, what do I need to change what I'm doing to make things work out better? A lot of it is going to be a combination, though, of both your verbal game of what you say and that body language put together. In the sense of body language more than anything else, though, do whatever makes you feel comfortable because what you feel the other person will feel. But at the same time, know that there's physical distance and spatial issues. And when people are engaging with you, you need to be close to them so that you can have the communication process work in a way that's favorable to you and have a deeper, quicker connection as opposed to talking through other people. The other thing you should think about in terms of business and for personal meetings is positioning, especially when there's like a formal regulation. What I mean that is, like, let's say that you have a dinner or a restaurant and there's particular people that you want to have seated with each other to make things happen. You should position each of them so they could talk next to each other. That's extremely important, especially in personal settings. I mean, people do it all the time in large gatherings, like weddings, but even in small group dinner. You usually have the person that is like a partner with somebody else next to that other person, unless that person is trying to make a business relationship or connection to that other person. So in restaurants, usually people have certain seats sitting next to particular people, so those connections and those relationships could build over that period of time, especially because most people, they're really busy. So the only time they have to do a lot of relationship building is through sitting down through meals and communicating with each other. In fact, most of my business relationships and personal relationships is done over lunch and dinner. And as a result, that's why so much of my time is spent eating out as opposed to eating at home. Of course, eating at home, you could also have a lot of gatherings and meetings and events, and as a result, if there's a lot of people that I trust and I want to really show that I'm really open to them, I'll invite them into my home and we'll have a relationship that way. Another thing I like about my home is that I have a table in my kitchen where I have 16 chairs around the whole kitchen table, and they can rotate, they can turn, they're all sitting next to each other, and around this table that's kind of like an island right in the middle of the kitchen so that people could interact with each other. And it's also a great place for me to have large group meetings and have people in a close enough proximity so they could talk to each other. So when you're organizing meetings, let's say that you're organizing a networking event or a function for people to get together, think about those dynamics to make sure that you understand, are you accomplishing your goal for this? If you're not having a situation where people can conduct the conversations that they need to conduct, that's not going to work out. That's why these positionings are so important. Another thing is that body language changes the way you feel. Because when you're smiling, you naturally will smile and you feel happier. When you're frowning, the same thing happens. When you're sitting back in your chair, you'll naturally feel slouchy. So if you want to get yourself into that right position, a lot of the things that help me to have energy is I like standing up or walking around. I like sitting upright and engaging in conversation, having like my body physically engage in people's conversations, because by me talking, just the act of me moving my mouth and moving my arms and being engaged, looking at a person, gives me energy, gives me life. You look at guys who are on stage like Tony Robbins or Tyler or most of the RSD instructors, and when they get on stage, they may be tired, they may be jet lagged, they may not have slept for the last night because they were going out to the bars and clubs. But at the same time, when you get them on stage, the physical act and presence of just vocalizing yourself, you feel that power, you can feel that energy, and it just captivates people. So just realize that these little cues, you could use them to your advantage, you could ride off of them and give you the energy you need, or you could just not and kind of be chill and be relaxed. Now, I know that one of the things that a lot of people do, they go to the gym because just the physical act of working out gives you energy for the rest of the day. And it's because of that energy, that process, that I realize that a lot of it happens just in my day-to-day life when I'm just talking to people on a regular basis. I see a lot of parallels between that. Now, a lot of people will ask, is body language in and of itself part of your outer game only, or is it also part of your inner game? Well, it's an interesting question because a lot of people don't think about body language as an internal belief system. They'll think it's really just something that you do physically as an outer process. The thing is, how you feel inside will naturally affect how your body language is presented, whether you like it or not, unless you're cognizantly thinking about your body language on a regular basis. So you gotta be really ready for that, especially like your smile or your facial expressions or your slouchiness or your energy and how you convey it to other people, or whether you're looking at them in the eyes or whether you're looking away or whether you're looking up or down, because a lot of people will talk about those eye signals, about whether they're looking to your left or right, whether they're lying or not, whether they're thinking about something creative or not, because there's so much of that talked about in books about poker and also books in terms of detective books where people will say, oh, they're looking that way, so maybe they're thinking to their left brain to try to come up with a story or what have you. I know also naturally there is truth in the fact that when people look to the sides, maybe they're not really engaged you, maybe they're trying to avoid you. So little cues like that do convey a lot of your inner belief systems. But by cognizantly knowing and playing those tells, like in poker, there's a guy who wrote a book of tells. His name was Carroll. And Mike Carroll, he's a guy who's a famous poker player because he would read all the things that people would convey. For example, if they're holding their breath, they're usually doing a bluff. And if they're just breathing normally and they're just like relaxed and calm and they're making big bets, maybe they're more likely telling the truth. Little things like that come across in your body language you're communicating with other people. I talk about poker because I play Texas Hold'em and I'm really good at it. But at the same time, all these little tells are different for each environment. For example, in the business world, a lot of people have the same kind of thing. For example, they might be colder. They might be like, if they're not really interested in talking to you, they might be like checking their phone, or maybe if they are talking to you, maybe they're looking away. And if they're engaged or you captivate them to more just like start looking at you, be more engaged in the conversation. In the same sense, in the dating world, you'll try to get that spark, that smile, that captivativeness. But at the same time, also, a lot of those interpersonal awkwardness might also lead the other person to be a little bit more shy at first, because a lot of people are introverted. They don't have that natural extrovertedness. In fact, sometimes I don't even know if I'm extroverted or introverted because I naturally like to hang out by myself and play video games or play golf. Now, I also like playing video games and golf with other people, so sometimes I'm wondering, maybe I am extroverted. But at the same time, I could understand and relate and slow down my pace so I'm throwing too much energy at those persons that might be too introverted, and allow them to relax and warm up so I could build that rapport. Because you also don't want to have a situation where you're overbearing in terms of your presence. You definitely need to calibrate. You can't just say, oh, I have one mode, it's on mode, and this is the mode that everyone's just going to feel when I'm interacting with them. Or the exact opposite, where you're just turning yourself off and super chilling and just relaxing all the time and not really trying to engage with the audience. If you want to do that, you could do that, but you're not going to be a true manager or a true leader of people if you're that kind of person. Sometimes, if you want to inspire people, you have to engage with them, not just through your words, but your actions and also your physical presence. So take that in mind in terms of communication, because in communication, your thoughts, words, and actions all combined together, and body language is definitely a key part of that process. Thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast, brought to you by Real Social Dynamics. If you want to ask questions that appear on future broadcasts, please ask them below in the comments. Subscribe to our channel. And if you want to get more engaged with what I'm doing in my life, visit rsdfoundersclub.com, where you'll get more interviews, more mastermind sessions, and a lot of great content.